The reception clock read 8:30 in the morning. The hallways were filled with hurried footsteps, the clinking of coffee cups blended with the sound of ringing phones. It was just another workday. But no one imagined that this day would be forever etched in everyone's memory. The boss stopped in front of her. He crossed his arms, and with a voice dripping with contempt, he spat out, "Is this what you call cleaning? Look at this floor, a disgrace. Even an animal would do better than you." The entire room fell silent. The sound of typing stopped. Even the coffee machine seemed to pause. Every eye turned to the scene. Some were shocked, others embarrassed. No one dared to say a word. She, frightened, tried to stand up. Her voice came out low, fragile, almost pleading. "Sir, I was still finishing. I just had this corner left." But he didn't allow it. He cut her off with even more brutality. "Shut up. You're not even fit to clean the floor you walk on. Imagine doing something truly useful." Some employees bit their lips to hold back words. Others felt shame burning inside them, as if they themselves had been struck. But no one had the courage to speak. Fear held them still. He then decided to make the spectacle bigger. He pointed at the bucket filled with dirty water and, laughing sarcastically, said, "Look here, ladies and gentlemen. This is the professional we have. This is our great cleaning lady. A disgrace to this company." A heavy silence took over the room. There was no laughter, only tension. And on her face, a stubborn tear slid down, even though she tried to hide it. The woman felt her heart tighten. Her face flushed, not with anger, but with shame. She wanted to disappear, to vanish from there, but inside her, something was lit. A silent flame, discreet, yet powerful. An inner voice whispered, "One day, life will answer for me." Without saying a word, she slowly stood up. She picked up the bucket with trembling hands and walked toward the restroom. Her steps were heavy, yet each one carried dignity. She would not give him the pleasure of seeing her cry in public. The moment she entered the restroom, she locked the door behind her. And only then did she allow the pain to overflow. Tears streamed down uncontrollably. Her chest heaved. She leaned against the sink, looked into the mirror, and barely recognized her own reflection. Yet amid the tears, she whispered a silent prayer, "Lord, give me strength. I will not give up." She believed that this would be just one more humiliation among so many. But little did she know that destiny was already in motion, ready to turn the tables. The sound of the bathroom door closing echoed like a sigh of relief, but also of pain. Inside, between cold and silent walls, she finally allowed herself to release everything that had been trapped. Tears flowed without permission, hot and heavy, marking her weary face. She leaned against the cracked porcelain sink, breathing with difficulty, as if the very air had become her enemy. Her hands trembled. The damp uniform clung to her skin, and her heart pounded like an uneven drum. In the mirror, she saw herself, but the reflection staring back seemed like that of a stranger. Deep circles under her eyes, faint wrinkles carved by time and struggle, and tear-filled eyes that told a story of endurance. She asked herself, "Why always me? Why does life insist on bringing me to my knees?" But deep down, she knew the answer. This was not the first time, and it probably wouldn't be the last. In that moment, painful memories surfaced. The first time she was humiliated as a young girl, when she tried for her very first job. The times she heard in silence that she had no future. The doors that had closed simply because she didn't have the right diploma or the right appearance. And above all, she remembered the night she lost her husband. Alone with 2 small children, she had to bury her own dreams in order to keep theirs alive. Working as a cleaning lady was not a shame. The real shame was giving up. The real shame was folding her arms and waiting for the worst. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, took a deep breath, and still staring at her reflection, she whispered a prayer almost inaudible. God, give me strength. I will not give up. I need to keep going. Not for me, but for them. At that very moment, as if that prayer had pierced through the silence of the walls, something shifted inside her. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a miracle. It was courage. The courage to face one more day. She picked up the bucket, adjusted her messy bun, and took a deep breath. When the bathroom door closed behind her, life seemed to weigh tons. But what no one there knew was that this woman carried a story far greater than any humiliation. She was not just a cleaning lady, she was a warrior, and her life was marked by battles that few would ever have the courage to face. Years ago, she had been happy. Married to the man she loved, she believed in a future full of promises. He was simple, but hard-working. Together, they dreamed of giving their children a better life than the one they had known. But fate, cruel and merciless, took her husband far too soon. A work accident claimed his life and left a void that would never be filled. From one day to the next, she found herself alone. 2 small children, bills piling up on the table, and a shattered heart. She cried through endless nights, but when the sun rose, she wiped her tears and stood up, because there was no choice. Either give up or fight. She chose to fight. She went out in search of work. She did not choose her work. She washed clothes, cleaned houses, carried boxes, took odd jobs in the middle of the night, anything so her children would have food on the table and could keep studying. And so, year after year, she built her story of resilience. The cleaning uniform was not a shame. It was a silent trophy of courage. Every stain on the apron represented a battle won. Every drop of sweat was a proof of love. And despite all the scars, there was something she never lost. Her faith. Faith was the flame that kept her standing when everything seemed to collapse. She believed that life could be harsh, but also fair, and that one day, somehow, her pain would make sense. Meanwhile, the boss, the man who spat out words as sharp as blades, lived a daily theater. On the outside, he seemed invincible. Luxury cars, champagne-filled parties, international trips, dinners at expensive restaurants. His shoes gleamed. His watch cost more than a year's salary for many employees. But behind the facade, there were shadows, hidden debts, shady deals, an insatiable hunger for power. He did not build, he consumed. And the more he had, the emptier he felt. What no one saw were the sleepless nights, the arguments with creditors, the fear of losing everything. But instead of learning from it, he took it out on the weakest, as if belittling others were the only way to feel superior. While the cleaning lady carried her life with honesty and sweat, he carried his image with lies and arrogance. 2 worlds. 2 opposite realities, a story on the verge of intertwining at a point of no return. That day, by humiliating her, he believed he had won. He believed he had shown strength in front of the others. But he did not know that he had planted the seed of his own downfall. For every tear she shed was not a sign of weakness. It was a silent cry that the universe heard, and life, sooner or later, always answers. While she carried on in silence, steady as always, his pride grew without limits. And pride, as history has proven time and again, always comes before the fall. He walked through the hallways like a tyrant in his castle. Each step made others retreat, as if his mere presence were a threat. When he spoke, his voice echoed like a sentence, and when he criticized, his words were as sharp as knives. Co-workers avoided eye contact. It was safer to pretend he didn't exist than to attract his attention. And to him, that silence was a sign of respect. He failed to realize it wasn't respect. It was fear. and fear never lasts forever. In the days that followed that humiliation, life at the company seemed to carry on as usual. But the atmosphere was heavy. The silence of the employees whenever the boss walked in was almost suffocating. No one dared to smile. No one dared to question. Everyone knew just one look from him, and the next victim would be chosen. The boss believed he was at his peak. He spent without limits, bought whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. He took pride in his superiority over others. But there was a thirst inside him that nothing could quench. Not a new car, not an expensive suit, not a lavish party. Everything felt empty. And to fill that emptiness, he trampled more and more on the people around him. The more he diminished others, the greater he believed himself to be. And so, without realizing it, he was feeding his own abyss. In meetings, he interrupted everyone. He humiliated managers, mocked suggestions, laughed at other people's ideas. He was the owner of the truth, the center of the universe, or at least, he believed he was. But what he failed to see was the weariness in his employees' eyes, the restrained revolt, the secret desire to see him fall. Even his business partners were beginning to doubt him. His arrogance was starting to come at a high cost. Partnerships were wearing thin. Important clients were beginning to drift away, but blinded by his own ego, he didn't notice. Meanwhile, the cleaning lady carried on, upholding her silent dignity. He was amassing invisible enemies, people who, in silence, waited for the right moment to turn their backs. And life, patient and relentless, was already beginning to align the pieces. His pride rose like a castle of glass, imposing, shining, yet fragile. One single blow, and it would all come crashing down. And that blow was closer than he could ever imagine. The ruin would come like an unexpected strike, at the moment he least expected it. Life has a peculiar way of teaching. When pride rises too high, the fall is all the harder. And for that man, the fall was about to begin. It was an ordinary afternoon when the phone rang in his office. The call came from an important client. The voice on the other end was not friendly. There were no greetings, no formalities, only a dry sentence. "We are canceling the contract. We can no longer trust your company." He remained silent for a few seconds. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. That contract was worth millions, responsible for maintaining part of the company's prestige. And in an instant, it was gone. When he hung up, cold sweat was already running down his neck. But he chose to convince himself it was just a setback, a stumble, nothing that couldn't be fixed. But bad news never comes alone. Days later, newspapers began to print headlines. "Financial scandal shakes company of renowned businessman." "Allegations of mismanagement put multi-million-dollar contract at risk." The words were everywhere, on every website, in every newscast. The sharp headlines corroded his public image. On the streets, people spoke his name with disdain. In the company's hallways, employees whispered. And for the first time, he didn't walk in admired or feared. He walked in judged. Emergency meetings were called. Partners applied pressure. Clients disappeared. Creditors called relentlessly. In that luxurious office, where once he reigned supreme, now the air reeked of nervousness. His hands trembled as he held the reports. His tone of voice no longer carried the same firmness. The looks that once were of submission were now of distrust. He tried to maintain his posture. Impeccable appearance. Harsh words, but inside him, fear grew like a suffocating shadow. Meanwhile, the employees watched. The same ones he had humiliated in silence, now witnessed his fall. Little by little, discreet smiles began to appear at the corners of their mouths. It wasn't open revenge, but the silent relief of those who had always longed for justice. The man who spoke loudly, who mocked others, who thought himself untouchable, was now stumbling over his own words. And each mistake, each slip, was like a brick falling from the castle he had built. The peak of his downfall came at a press conference. Cameras, flashes, journalists everywhere. He tried to give a speech, to justify himself. But the questions were relentless. The journalists surrounded him like predators. Is it true there? Was fraud in the contracts? How do you intend to pay the creditors? Are you going to step down from the board? He stammered, sweated, lost control. That man, once arrogant and self-assured, now looked like an empty puppet before the crowd. The images spread, and his humiliation was public. Shortly after, everything collapsed for good. The partners removed him from the company. The debts devoured his assets. The luxury cars were sold. The mansion lost its shine. And suddenly, the powerful businessman had nothing left. No power, no prestige, no respect. The man who had laughed at the cleaning lady in front of everyone. Now he was the target of laughs and whispers behind his back. And his greatest punishment was not the material loss. It was the shame. It was feeling, in his own skin, the pain of humiliation. Ruined and alone, he believed he had lost everything. But destiny still had one final lesson, and that lesson would come from where he least expected. The following weeks were relentless. The man who had once been the center of attention now walked the streets like a ghost. The looks that once were of flattery had turned into looks of judgment. Fair-weather friends vanished like smoke, and loneliness became his constant companion. The pressure of ruin began to take its toll. Sleepless nights, stress, the loss of everything he once considered important, turned into physical pain. Strong palpitations in his chest, constant dizziness, a fatigue that seemed to drain the very life out of him. Without enough money for private hospitals, the ones where he had once been received like a king, he was left with the only option he had always despised, the public hospital. And it was there that his arrogance met its first fatal blow. The next morning he arrived early. He wore simple clothes, an old coat that clashed with the impeccable suits of his past. In the line, dozens of people waited. Children crying, elderly coughing, women holding documents and prescriptions. He sat in silence, his gaze lowered. He felt ashamed to be there, ashamed to mingle with people who, in other times, would never have even made it past the reception desk of his company. As he waited, every minute felt like an eternity. And then, destiny decided to act. When he lifted his eyes, his heartbeat quickened. There she was, the cleaning lady, the same one he had humiliated in front of everyone, the same one whose dignity he had tried to crush. She walked down the hospital corridor with steady steps, a simple bag on her shoulder, and a bottle of water in her hands. She wasn't a patient. She was there to accompany an elderly neighbor who needed care. Their eyes met. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. He wanted to look away. He wanted to vanish, but he couldn't. She noticed the state he was in, pale, sweating, visibly weakened, and instead of walking away, she came closer. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked, her voice calm, almost maternal. He tried to answer, but shame choked his words. His voice came out weak, trembling. I'm waiting for care. I don't feel well." She looked into his eyes, and without hesitation, she extended the bottle of water. "Here, drink. It will help a little." He took it. His hands trembled. And in that simple gesture, he felt something he never expected, compassion. The compassion of someone he had wounded, yet who now proved greater than his arrogance. And she, the dignified one. While waiting, she stayed close, making sure he was all right. She did not bring up the past. She did not throw in his face the cruelty she had suffered. She simply did what she had always done, chose the path of kindness, and that silence was like a sentence. He realized he didn't need words to feel the weight of his own guilt. The simple fact that she was there, caring for him, was the greatest lesson he could ever receive. That day, sitting in that line, drinking the water offered by the one he had once despised, he understood. Life was paying him back, in the same coin, everything he had sown. But along with the pain, there was an opportunity, a chance to change. The pride that once defined him was beginning to shatter, and in its place, something new was being born, something he had never truly felt. Before humility. That night, he couldn't sleep. Her serene and kind gaze haunted him like an echo within his conscience, and for the first time, he began to long for change. The hospital corridor slowly emptied. Footsteps echoed like memories, dissolving into the cold floor. He remained seated, holding the bottle of water she had given him. He wasn't thirsty. He was ashamed. That kindness, it hurt. It hurt because there was no defense against it. Against shouting, he had learned to shout back. Against insults, he knew how to strike back. But against kindness, there was no armo. In the early hours of the morning, he returned to the small apartment he now called home. An empty living room. A thin curtain that let in the light from the street. A refrigerator with almost nothing inside. And a mattress on the floor, leaning against the wall. He sat in the dark, without turning on the light. Outside, the distant sound of a late bus and a barking dog. Inside, the weight of his conscience. He ran his hand across his forehead, still damp. His face aged by exhaustion. His fingers trembled as they touched the pocket of his coat. There, the crumpled paper of an old business card, names that once chased after him. Now, no one answered. He lay down, but sleep never came. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her gaze, serene, without accusation. The water in his hands like a liquid forgiveness. He turned one way, then the other. Got up. Paced from one corner to the other as if he could escape himself, but he couldn't. His conscience followed him. He remembered the company hall, crowded, silent, when he pointed his finger at her. He remembered the stifled laughter, the tear she tried to hide. He remembered his own voice, harsh, inflated, empty. It was like watching himself from the outside, and the sight was unbearable. He went to the sink and turned on the faucet. Let the water run, washed his face. But the dirt was not on the outside. It was in his actions, in his habits, in the choices of years. The steam from the improvised shower fogged up the mirror. With his hand, he drew a transparent line on the glass. On the other side, a stranger stared back at him. Before, the expensive watch, the shining shoes, the impeccable suit. Now, the wrinkled shirt, the weary gaze, the unshaven chin. The same man. A different life. And for the first time, the contrast didn't enrage him. It taught him. He remembered the hospital line. The child with a fever in the arms of an exhausted mother. The elderly man clutching his cane with trembling fingers. People who would never have the luxury of feeling untouchable. People he had never seen. Because he had never wanted to see. In that mirror he understood. The power he once had was not greatness. It was escape. Ego painted in gold. He returned to the mattress. Closed his eyes. Tried to imagine what would have happened if she had done what he would have done. Struck back. Accused him. Exposed his ruin right there, in front of everyone. But she stayed silent. And in that silence, she taught. Her silence was not omission. It was choice. It was greatness. It was proof that dignity does not need an audience. She did not speak about him. She spoke about herself. I will not become what wounded me, and that destroyed him inside. In a good way. When the day broke, he opened the window. The cold air rushed in, pushing away the stale scent of a sleepless night. He sat at the makeshift table, a wooden crate, and picked up an old notebook. He wrote, I was wrong. He stopped, read it, felt the weight of those two words. He tried to continue. I was wrong when I humiliated. I was wrong when I chose to look big instead of being human. I was wrong when I used the pain of others to disguise my own weakness. He took a deep breath. His hands were sweating. He folded the sheet. Put it in his pocket. On his phone, he opened his contacts, names, numbers, people who no longer wanted to hear from him. He deleted some, saved others. It was not the time to justify his life. It was the time to fix what could still be fixed. He opened a notes app. He wrote a list. Apologize to the team in person. Look for the cleaning lady. Offer something concrete to make amends. Learn to listen. Be silent more. Speak less. It seemed small compared to the damage, but it was a beginning. He decided to go out. His body still ached. His head throbbed, but there was a new impulse in his steps. He went down the stairs slowly, like someone learning to walk again. On the street, he passed by a newsstand. The headlines remained relentless. He didn't look away. He didn't hide. He read. He accepted. He waited for the bus. He stood holding the cold metal bar, feeling the sway of the city. He listened to conversations. Problems, bills, jobs, lives moving forward, and he realized that the world had always gone on without him, despite him. He got off 2 blocks before the usual stop. He wanted to walk the rest. He wanted to feel the ground. He stopped in front of the building of his former company, the glass reception, the turnstiles, the smell of expensive coffee, the same white, lights on the ceiling, the same rush of people, everything the same, only he different. He didn't go in. It wasn't the time, not without knowing what to say, not without deserving to be heard. He sat on a bench in the square across the street, watched for long minutes, saw an intern trying to balance cups of coffee, saw a secretary holding papers with tired eyes, saw a security guard opening the door for a delivery man, people. All his life he had people around him, but he never saw people. He saw roles, a tightness in his chest, not from anger, from regret. His phone vibrated, an automatic charge. Then, silence. But deep down there was a new voice, different from the shouting that had always lived in his head. A quiet voice, serene. That seemed to echo her gesture in the hospital. Drink water, stand up, begin again. It wasn't self-help. It wasn't a catchphrase. It was simple. It was possible. He opened the notebook again, wrote, Today I will look for any job. Today I will listen without interrupting. Today I will begin to give back what I took. He put the notebook away, stood up, took 3 steps, stopped, returned. He picked up the bottle, the same one, half full, looked at it with respect. To him, in that moment, it was a symbol of what he had received without deserving, of what he now wanted to learn to give. Her silence had not been a pause. It had been a path. Without speeches, without spotlights, without trophies, she showed that true strength is not the shout. It is self-control. It is not the attack. It is the choice not to strike back. It is not punishment. It is the possibility of transformation. And for the first time, he wanted to be truly strong. With a restless heart and an awakened conscience, he decided to take the first visible step, to seek out the one he had hurt and face his own demons. But would he have the courage to go all the way? That night had been different. There was no peaceful sleep, no rest. But, for the first time in a long time, there was clarity. He woke before the sun rose. Sitting on the cold mattress, he held the small notebook where he had written a few words the night before. Those sentences still echoed in his mind. I was wrong. I need to ask for forgiveness. It wasn't just a list. It was a map. A map to escape the labyrinth he himself had locked into. He decided to begin with those closest to him, or rather with those he had hurt the most. He boarded the crowded bus, feeling bodies brushing against his own. The smell of sweat, of hurry, of people who never stopped. It was a world he had only known from afar. Before, he had seen people like this through the window of his luxury car. Now, he was one of them. Each jolt of the bus was a reminder. He was no longer above anyone. He was among them. And perhaps this was exactly where he needed to be. He arrived at the door of his former company. The same glass doors, the same reception. But the reflection he saw was no longer that of the man who had once ruled there. It was of someone broken, rebuilding himself in silence. Darkness still lingered. But now there was light. It was not the end of the road. It was only the beginning of a long journey to rebuild not what he had lost in wealth, but what he had lost in humanity. And within him, a certainty began to grow. If he could truly change, perhaps there was still hope. But was the world ready to accept his change? The road of repentance is long, and not everyone was willing to believe in his transformation. He took a deep breath. Entered. The looks were immediate. Employees whispered. Some exchanged surprised glances, others disdain. There were even those who smiled, not out of joy, but irony. He walked to the room where he knew he would find some of his former colleagues. Opened the door slowly. Silence fell like a stone. Everyone stopped what they were doing, and before them, with a trembling voice, he said, I came to apologize. The words seemed to weigh tons. He who had so often spoken with firmness now trembled like a child before adults. I was wrong. I was wrong to humiliate. I was wrong to treat you as if you were disposable. I was not the man I pretended to be. And today, I pay the price for it. There was silence. Some looked away. Others stared coldly. An older employee who for years had swallowed her pride because of him crossed her arms and said, Now it's easy, isn't it? When you've lost everything, you show up here asking for forgiveness. He lowered his head, swallowed hard, and replied, You're right. It's easy to speak when there's nothing left. But I didn't come here to recover anything. I came only to acknowledge my mistake. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I had to try. No one answered. But the silence was different this time. It wasn't fear, it was reflection. When he left that room, his heart felt crushed. There were no embraces, no words of comfort, but for the first time, there were no shouts, no looks of terror. He was no longer a tyrant. He was just a broken man trying to stand again. On the way back, he thought about giving up. It was too painful. The old pride whispered, Why bother? They will never accept you. You will never be forgiven. But her image, the cleaning lady at the hospital, returned like a flame in the darkness. If she, the one he had hurt the most, could offer him water in silence, who was he to give up on offering at least an apology? He decided then that he needed to see her, not at the hospital, not by chance, but face to face, eye to eye. Through acquaintances, he learned that she was still working there, at the company. It was risky. He could be rejected. He could be thrown out. But it didn't matter. The next morning, he returned. This time not with the upright, lofty posture of one who commands, but with the humility of one who pleads. He found her in the hallway, calmly sweeping. She lifted her eyes. Time seemed to stop. He took a deep breath. His hands were sweating, and finally he said, I came here to ask for forgiveness. You can't imagine how much I regret what I did. I am not the same man anymore, and if one day you can forgive me, that will be more than I deserve. She remained silent for a few seconds, the kind of silence that teaches more than any speech. And then, with the same serenity as always, she replied, Forgiveness is not for those who deserve it. It's for those who need it. And from what I see, you need it." He felt a knot in his throat. The tears came, hot, heavy. He didn't try to hide them. Because for the first time, there was no reason to hide who he truly was. He walked out different. The weight was still there. But now there was light. It was not the end of the road. It was only the beginning of a long journey to rebuild not what he had lost in wealth, but what he had lost in humanity, and within him a certainty began to grow. If he could truly change, perhaps there was still hope. But was the world ready to accept his change? The road of repentance is long, and not everyone was willing to believe in his transformation. The day dawned cloudy, and yet a thread of light crossed through the window of the simple room. He rose slowly, feeling his body heavy, but his heart, for the first time, aligned with something greater than his own ego. In his pocket, the notebook. On the table, the bottle of water, the same one, as a silent reminder. Be worthy. He took a deep breath, and he left. Went down the stairs of the building and headed to a job interview. The first interview ended before it even began. Your background is not compatible with our culture. Translation: we know who you were. In the second, the recruiter kept the polite smile. We'll be in touch. They never were. In the third, the manager looked over the resume, raised his eyebrows and said, "We need people to do, not to boss around." He nodded without defense. "I'm here to do." He wasn't hired. He walked out of the building slowly, staring at the ground. Each no carried the weight of all the no's he had once given to those who asked for a chance. It was life, settling the scores. At the end of a rainy afternoon, he found an ad posted on a bakery door. Help wanted, loading and unloading, daily pay. No one asked for references. They asked for arms, and he had them. In the early hours of the morning, his body discovered a kind of exhaustion the office had never taught him. Heavy boxes, the smell of cardboard and strong coffee. The manager spoke without looking him in the eyes. "Keep up the pace, friend." Here it's all about pace. He didn't complain. He didn't negotiate. He worked. When his back ached, he remembered the cleaning lady bent over the cold floor. And he understood. Dignity doesn't need an audience. Dignity is standing up, carrying on, and if you fall, standing up again. At the end of the day, money counted into his hand. Little, but honest. He kept it as one keeps a promise. I will not go back to who I was. He began returning to the places where he had once been great, not to be seen, but to see. He lifted his head at the entrance of his former company and looked for the security guard. "I treated you badly many times. I didn't see you." The man crossed his arms, suspicious. "And now you see?" "Now I see." "Fine. Go check if there's a line for the elevator." Short, dry, real. Forgiveness was not given. But the truth was spoken. That was already a beginning. In the break room, he found the maid who had endured months of harsh orders. "I'm sorry for telling you to shut up that day," she breathed, lifted her chin, and said, "You don't remember, but I do. I was crying, and you asked for more sugar in your coffee." Silence. "I remember, and I am ashamed." She pressed her lips together, holding back tears. "Fine, go, I'll try to forget. I'll try." Sometimes, that's the most a heart can give in the first step. At lunchtime, he began eating where the assistants ate. Simple lunchboxes, tired laughter, conversations about late rent and crowded buses. He spoke little, listened much. He discovered that the cleaning crew didn't have enough gloves. The supply cart broke down all the time and no one authorized maintenance. That the night shift swept more area than the contract required because no one notices anyway. He wrote everything down in his notebook, not as someone collecting complaints, but as someone who, at last, was beginning to see the invisible work. In the afternoon, he found the cleaning lady in the supply room. She was folding cloths with the attention of someone saying a prayer. "Thank you for yesterday," he said. She lifted her eyes. "Do your part. I want to learn. Then start by carrying the bucket, without spilling." He smiled, almost like a boy. He carried it. Walking beside her in silence was a lesson no resume could ever offer. That night, in the simple room, he opened the notebook and wrote, "Small company, dignified services, people at the center." He sketched a name, scribbled a rough logo, erased, rewrote, "Clean path," not just because it was about cleaning, but because that was what he was searching for, a clean path for his own story. He did the math. Sold his last expensive watch, bought a used laptop, 2 industrial brooms, a second-hand vacuum cleaner, 3 pairs of gloves, boxes of reinforced trash bags. He kept the receipts as one keeps promises. The next day, he searched for free courses. Found an online module on facilities best practices and another on workplace safety. He studied like a starving man. Learned the basics of bidding, lean budgeting, cash flow, and small business invoices. Each new spreadsheet was a bridge laid across the abyss of his past. The first proposal was for a neighborhood school. Fair price, clear description, without promising what he couldn't deliver. He waited 3 days for the answer. It came as a no. He thanked them and asked why. Another company charges less. Do they provide protective gear? Do they sign contracts? Do they replace equipment when it breaks? Silence on the other end. "I don't know. I know the cost of humiliating those who work. I don't do that," the principal breathed. "I'll let you know if another bid opens." He hung up. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a never. A week later, the superintendent of an old building called. "Are you the guy who came here, listened to the ladies complain about the lack of cloths, and didn't charge anything to take inventory?" "That's me." "Will you take care of stairways A and B for a month trial contract? I pay little, but I pay fair." "I accept." On the first night, he himself climbed the stairs with the vacuum cleaner. He didn't manage from afar. He did it. He sweated. And when he finished, he wrote in his notebook, "To lead is to do first, and to keep doing." The superintendent mentioned him to another superintendent. The maid mentioned him to her sister, who worked at a clinic. The cleaning lady, her, recommended his name in a women's community group. He's different now. 2 proposals became 3 visits. 1 visit became a quarterly contract. Lean payment, short deadlines, demanding conditions. He signed with steady hands. It wasn't greatness, it was ground. And amid those small victories, he returned to his old company with another purpose: to offer free training for the cleaning staff on proper use of protective gear and basic ergonomics. "No cost. I just want to give back a little of what I once did wrong." The manager was suspicious. "What's in it for you?" "The chance not to be the same." They signed a simple agreement. He walked in with the manual he had written, by hand, sketching handles, heights, sweeping routes. During the class, his eyes searched for hers. She watched in silence, arms crossed, neutral expression. When it ended, she placed the laminated manual in the cart. "This will stay here," he nodded with a new respect that no longer needed words. One afternoon, 2 managers were arguing at the reception. A cleaning company had quit in the middle of the contract. They handed over the keys and left. "Who's taking over until the end of the month?" Silence. Glances exchanged. He happened to be passing by, delivering an invoice. He didn't speak. He just raised his hand, like someone asking for a turn. "I'll take it. For 30 days. No penalty. But with one condition: full protective gear and payment on time." They signed in a hurry. The next day, he handed out New gloves, adjusted schedules, listened to the team, reassigned routes, replaced the cart that was always breaking down. The corridor, once dull, began to shine. Not with wax. With respect, the rumor spread. He delivered. Just like that. In HR, the story gained traction. The employee who never misses work, never complains, and solved that meeting room problem all by himself. The janitor, without asking, for anything, started guiding new colleagues, adjusting shifts, reducing product waste. He did it with the care of someone folding his own blanket, the manager noticed. "Why isn't he a coordinator yet?" someone replied. "Because no one ever paid attention." This time they did, and the hallway whispers began. "There's a promotion coming." He was the last to know, and he smiled to himself with a relief too big for his chest. That night, his phone vibrated on the table. It was the superintendent of the first building. "A friend of mine wants to meet you. Small clinic, short contract. Are you in?" "I'm in." Minutes later, another message. Unknown number. "Good evening. I received your recommendation. We need someone who delivers without humiliating. Can you come tomorrow?" He read it again, closed his eyes, gave thanks in silence. He looked at the bottle of water on the table. It reflected the yellow lamp with a small, gentle light. He understood. He was ready to take the next step, but not alone. He picked up the notebook, wrote, "Invitation." Below it, 3 words, "Her, to lead." He put the pen away, and for the first time, he slept. The next morning, he knocked on the door with a proposal that would change 2 stories at once, her promotion and the invitation no one expected. The sun rose strong that morning, the kind of sun that seems to announce change. He woke up early, put on the simplest clothes, carefully ironed, and picked up the notebook. On the first page, scribbled in firm letters, was the title he had written the night before. Invitation. At the exit of the old company building, he waited for her. Not in the center, not in the spotlight. Leaning against one of the building's columns, humble, with his hands clasped together, she walked up to him, wary. "What are you doing here?" He took a deep breath, lifted his eyes, and answered, "I came to make you an invitation." She frowned. Invitation. He pulled the notebook from his pocket, showed the page with the title written in firm letters. "I'm starting over. A small service company, nothing grand. But I want to do it differently. I want people to be seen, respected, treated as they deserve. And I can't do this alone. I need someone who truly knows what dignity is. I need you." Silence. Time seemed to stop. She looked at him as if weighing centuries of history. At the exit of the old company building, he waited for her. Not in the center, not in the spotlight. Leaning against one of the building's columns, humble, with his hands clasped together. She remembered the day she had been humiliated, the bucket of water, the stifled laughter, the heavy silence. And now that same man stood before her, asking for help. For a few seconds, she said nothing. He swallowed hard, expecting a no, expecting rejection, perhaps even deserving it. But then she smiled faintly, a short, restrained smile. "Do you know what the difference is between you and me?" He remained silent. "You had to lose everything to learn to value. I always knew the value of things, of work, of dignity, of faith. And that's why I accept. Because I know that now you're ready to truly learn." He closed his eyes, relieved. Tears welled up, but not of shame, of gratitude. He extended his hand. She gripped it firmly, and in that simple gesture, they sealed a new beginning. Days later, the small company began its activities. Modest equipment, a simple space, but a team full of energy. She, now as leader, organized schedules, guided the newcomers, reviewed contracts, and taught the importance of care in every detail. He, at her side, not as a distant boss anymore, but as a co-worker, learned to value every gesture, every effort. In the first contract delivered, the clients were surprised by the quality, not because the cleaning was flawless alone, but because there was respect in every detail, and respect, when it takes root, shows through. One night after finishing the day's work, he looked at the team gathered together. Men and women who once would have been invisible to him were now his greatest treasure. And moved, he said, "You do not work for me. We work together. And if today I have something to offer, it is because I learned from the person who least deserved to suffer what she suffered because of me. Maria, thank you for teaching me what dignity is." The team applauded. She, discreet as always, only nodded, but deep down she knew. Finally, justice had come. Life had returned what was once taken from her in humiliation, and with interest. The man who once humiliated now worked side by side with the woman who endured. His cruelty and destiny, wise and silent, showed that nothing goes unnoticed, that every tear has its value, that every act of kindness, sooner or later, comes back multiplied. She, the cleaning lady, had become a respected coordinator and leader. He, the arrogant man, had become a learner of humility, and together they were building something neither of them could have imagined, a clean future, a true one. But what this story truly teaches is not only found in falls and rewards, but in the moral engraved forever. Pride can bring you down, but humility is what lifts you up. The silence of the night covered the city. On the streets, the streetlights cast long shadows, reminding that everything in life has two sides. And so it is with stories. What begins in arrogance often ends in humility. The man who once raised his voice to humiliate now had learned to bow his head to serve. The woman who once lowered her eyes to hold back tears now lifted her face with dignity and respect. Two destinies. Two opposite journeys, and one eternal lesson. Pride always promises greatness, but in truth, it corrodes from within. It makes us believe we are greater by diminishing others. It makes us think that the silence of fear is respect. But all of that is illusion. Life, sooner or later, finds a way to collect, to turn the tables, to show that no one is so high they cannot fall, and no one is so small they cannot rise. It was at the hospital, in the simple waiting line, in the cup of water offered without resentment, that he learned the greatest lesson of all. True strength is not in humiliating, but in forgiving. Not in stepping on others, but in extending a hand. Not in being served, but in serving. The cleaning lady didn't need to shout. She didn't need to take revenge. She didn't need to prove anything. Her silence was the answer. Her dignity was the payback, and her kindness was the most powerful weapon of all. Whoever sows arrogance reaps loneliness. Whoever plants contempt reaps shame. But whoever sows faith, even through tears, reaps justice. And whoever chooses humility, even after pain, reaps reward. Life does not fail. It may delay, it may seem slow, but it never misses the destination of what it returns. Never underestimate anyone. Never mistake simplicity for weakness. Never treat as invisible those who carry in their hands the weight of dignity. Because time passes, power changes places, and the one who is humiliated today may be exalted tomorrow. Life always pays back, and when it does, there is no escape. He humiliated the cleaning lady in front of everyone, but in the end, it was life that humiliated him, and she, in silence, won.